The apartment was silent except for the baby's breathing, soft, uneven, the kind that made me check on her every 20 minutes. I stood in the doorway of the bedroom, watching the rise and fall of her chest in the borrowed crib, 3 months old, still small enough that her entire body fit between my elbow and my wrist when I held her. The note was still on the kitchen counter, where I'd found it 6 hours ago. I didn't need to read it again. The words had already burned themselves into memory. I can't do this. I'm sorry. Don't try to find me. Her handwriting, her pen, her choice. The closet in the bedroom was half empty. Her toiletries were gone. The car seat she complained about installing was still in my trunk, because she'd taken a ride share to wherever she'd gone. I moved to the kitchen and filled the kettle, though I wasn't sure I wanted tea. The motion gave me something to do. Outside the window, the streetlights hummed in the November dark. It was past midnight. I should sleep. Lily would wake in 2 hours, then again at 5, but my body refused. I kept expecting to hear her key in the lock, her footsteps in the hallway, some explanation that would make the note make sense. The kettle clicked off. I poured water into a mug and let the tea bag steep, watching the color bleed into the water like a stain spreading. On the counter beside the note were 3 unopened bills, a half-empty container of formula, and the hospital bracelet Lily had worn when we brought her home. I picked it up. Baby girl Harrison. Mother, Rachel Voss. Father, Lucas Harrison. We'd both been there. We'd both signed the birth certificate. We'd both promised. I set the bracelet down and checked my phone. No messages. I'd sent 2 texts earlier. Are you safe? And please just let me know you're okay. But the read receipts never appeared. She'd either blocked me or turned off her phone. I didn't know which felt worse. Lily stirred in the other room, a small sound that pulled me instantly toward her. I crossed the apartment in 4 steps and leaned over the crib. Her eyes were still closed, her fist curled against her cheek. False alarm. I adjusted the blanket anyway, smoothing it across her chest with careful fingers. She smelled like baby soap and milk. Her hair was dark like Rachel's, but she had my nose, my chin. People said she looked like both of us. I wondered if that would change. I returned to the kitchen and sat at the small table, the mug between my hands. The tea was too hot to drink, but I held it anyway, letting the heat press into my palms. Tomorrow I'd have to call my supervisor and explain why I needed time off. Tomorrow I'd have to figure out daycare, or find someone who could watch Lily while I worked, or somehow compress 8 hours of work into the 4-hour window between feedings. Tomorrow I'd have to become enough for both of us. But that night, I just sat in the quiet apartment and waited for morning, listening to my daughter breathe in the next room, the only sound that mattered anymore. Lily was in 1st grade by then, reading chapter books and asking questions I had to look up on my phone to answer properly. We lived in the same apartment, but it felt different now. Warmer, more lived in. Her drawings covered the refrigerator. Her backpack hung by the door. The crib was long gone, replaced by a small bed with a quilt my mother had sewn, patterned with stars. I'd built something stable. Not perfect, but steady. I worked as a project coordinator for a mid-sized logistics company, hours that let me drop Lily off at school and pick her up most afternoons. We had routines. Breakfast at 7, homework at the kitchen table, bedtime stories at 8:30. She knew I packed her lunches. She knew I came to every parent-teacher conference. She never asked about her mother, and I never offered explanations she hadn't requested. Then one Tuesday in October, my phone rang during lunch. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Lucas Harrison? The voice was professional. Clipped. This is Jennifer Wade from Family Services. I'm calling regarding a custody inquiry filed last week. I set down my sandwich. My office suddenly felt smaller. I'm sorry, what inquiry? A petition was submitted by Rachel Voss requesting visitation rights and potential shared custody of Lily Marie Harrison. You should have received formal notification by mail, but I'm calling to schedule an initial assessment meeting. The room tilted slightly. I pressed my palm flat against the desk. She hasn't been in contact for 5 years. She left when Lily was 3 months old. I understand this may be unexpected, Mr. Harrison. However, the petition has been filed, and we're required to conduct a review. Can you come in Friday at 2? I agreed because I had no choice. When I hung up, I sat staring at the phone for 10 minutes, trying to process what it meant. Rachel wanted back in. After 5 years of silence, no birthday cards, no child support, no messages asking if Lily was even alive, she decided she had rights worth claiming. That evening, after Lily was asleep, I pulled out the folder I kept in my desk drawer. Inside were copies of everything. The birth certificate, the note she'd left, bank statements showing I paid for everything alone, medical records with only my name listed as guardian. I kept it all, not out of bitterness, but because some part of me had always known this moment might come. I read through the documents slowly, checking dates and signatures. Every pediatrician visit, me. Every daycare payment, me. Every emergency contact form, my mother's number, then mine, then my mother's again. There was no record of Rachel anywhere except the birth certificate and that single piece of notebook paper with 11 words on it. I could fight this. I had the evidence. But as I sat there surrounded by paperwork, I realized something that changed the shape of my anger. This wasn't about winning or losing. This was about Lily, about what she deserved to know, what she deserved to be protected from, and what example I needed to set about how people should be treated, even when they've hurt you. If Rachel wanted to be part of Lily's life now, she had to prove she was capable of it. Not to me, to herself, and to Lily. And if she wasn't, the record would show that too. I didn't need to wage war. I just needed to keep doing what I'd been doing. Showing up, telling the truth, and trusting that consistency would speak louder than any accusation I could make. I closed the folder and put it back in the drawer. On Friday, I'd go to the meeting. I'd answer their questions honestly. And I'd let the facts do what facts do, reveal character without commentary. The meeting at Family Services was scheduled for 2 o'clock on a Friday, but I arrived 20 minutes early with a leather portfolio containing every document I collected over 5 years. The waiting room smelled like industrial cleaning solution and old carpet. I sat in a plastic chair near the window and watched other families come and go. Tired parents, restless children, social workers carrying clipboards with the weight of small lives attached to them. Jennifer Wade called me in at 2:15. Her office was small and cluttered with case files stacked on every surface. She gestured to a chair across from her desk and opened a manila folder with Lily's name printed on the tab. "Thank you for coming in, Mr. Harrison. I've reviewed the petition filed by Ms. Voss, and I need to ask you some questions about Lily's care and living situation." She clicked her pen. "How long have you been the primary caregiver?" "Since she was 3 months old. Rachel left in November 5 years ago. I haven't heard from her since." She made a note. "And you've had no contact? No financial support?" "None. I have bank records showing all expenses paid by me. Daycare, medical, everything. I can provide copies." "That would be helpful." She paused, looking at something in the file. Ms. Voss has stated in her petition that she left due to postpartum depression and felt unable to safely care for the child at that time. She claims she's now in a stable position and wants to reconnect with her daughter. Can you speak to that? I kept my voice level. She left a note. She didn't mention depression. She didn't ask for help. She disappeared. Do you have the note? I slid a photocopy across the desk. Jennifer read it, her expression unchanged, then added it to file. I'll need to conduct a home visit and interview Lily separately. We'll also be speaking with Ms. Voss. The process typically takes 6 to 8 weeks. That was the beginning. Over the next month, our lives became a series of inspections and interviews. Jennifer came to the apartment on a Wednesday afternoon, walking through each room with a clipboard, checking smoke detectors and cabinet locks, asking questions about routines and emergency procedures. Lily sat on the couch doing homework, confused about why a stranger was measuring the space between her bed and the window. I explained it as just some paperwork for school, which felt like the smallest lie I'd ever told, and the most necessary. Then came the interview with Lily alone. They took her into a separate room at the Family Services office for 40 minutes while I sat in the waiting area, staring at a poster about childhood nutrition and imagining every question they might ask. When she came out, she looked small and uncertain, and I wanted to pick her up the way I had when she was 3 and carry her out of that building. What do they ask you? I said in the car, just stuff about school, and if I'm happy. She was quiet for a moment. They asked if I know my mom. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. What did you say? I said no. Is that okay? That's the truth, Lily. The truth is always okay. But the truth didn't protect us from what came next. Word spread somehow, maybe through the school, maybe through Jennifer's inquiries, and suddenly people had opinions. Another parent at pickup asked me if everything was all right at home, her tone suggesting she already believed it wasn't. My supervisor called me into his office to ask about personal matters that might affect my performance. Even my neighbor, Mrs. Chun, who'd watched Lily during emergencies for years, started asking careful questions about whether I needed help, as if help was a code word for intervention. The pressure wasn't loud. It was constant and procedural. Forms to fill out, appointments to keep, questions to answer in waiting rooms under fluorescent lights. I wrote statements explaining the timeline, submitted character references from Lily's teachers, provided 5 years of financial records showing uninterrupted care. Each document felt like proof I shouldn't have needed to give. The hardest part was the uncertainty. I didn't know what Rachel had told them. I didn't know if she'd build a case that made me look neglectful or bitter. I only knew that the system, once activated, moved with its own momentum, and all I could do was show up and answer honestly every time they asked. One evening, after another round of questions at the Family Services office, Lily and I walked to the car in silence. She slipped her hand into mine in the parking lot, her small fingers curling around my palm. "Dad," she said quietly, "are they going to take me away?" I stopped walking. I crouched down so we were eye level, and I looked at her directly. "No, I promise. We're going to be fine." She nodded, but I could see the worry still there, a shadow that hadn't existed 6 weeks ago. I kept her safe from everything I could control. Now I was learning there were systems I couldn't control, only endure. 15 years later, Lily called me from her office on a Thursday afternoon in March. "Dad," she said, and I could hear something careful in her voice, the tone she used when she was trying to stay professional about something personal. "Something happened at work today. Can I come over tonight?" She arrived at 7 with takeout and a look I recognized. The same expression she'd worn at 16 when she'd found out Rachel had sent a birthday card after years of silence, and at 22 when she declined Rachel's Facebook friend request without explanation. Controlled, measured, but underneath it, a question she was still figuring out how to ask. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where she'd done her homework 15 years ago, now scarred with coffee rings and the wear of daily use. She opened her laptop and turned it toward me. We had an applicant interview today for a senior consultant position. I'm on the hiring committee. She clicked to a file. This is her resume. The name at the top was Rachel Voss. I stared at the document, reading without processing at first. Education, work history, references, a professional life assembled over 2 decades. Marketing consultant, project manager, currently employed at a competitor firm. Skills listed in neat bullet points. Nothing about the person who'd left a 3-month-old baby and disappeared. She didn't recognize me. Lily said quietly, "I use your last name professionally, Harrison, not Voss." And I looked different than she'd expect. But I knew her immediately. I closed the laptop slowly. "What did you do?" I conducted the interview. Asked the standard questions. She was polished, confident. Talked about her career trajectory, her accomplishments, how she's looking for new challenges. Lily leaned back in her chair. She mentioned she'd taken a few years off early in her career for personal reasons, but said it made her more resilient. The anger I felt was old and familiar, something I'd learned to carry quietly over the years. "Did she ask about you?" "No. She has no idea who I am." At the end, when we were doing the standard background questions, I asked if there was anything else she wanted to tell us about her work history or personal circumstances that might be relevant. Lily's voice was steady. She said no, said her record spoke for itself. We sat in silence for a moment. Outside, I could hear traffic on the street, the normal sound of evening settling in. Inside, the past had arrived uninvited and was waiting for a response. What happens next? I asked. We make a hiring decision next week. I'm one of 3 votes. She met my eyes. I have to recuse myself. There's a conflict of interest. You're going to tell them. I have to. It's policy. If I have a personal connection to a candidate, I'm required to disclose it and step back from the decision. She paused. But that's not what I came here to talk about. I waited. I've been thinking about what I'd do if I ever saw her again, Lily said. When I was younger, I imagined confronting her, asking why she left, making her explain. But sitting across from her today, watching her perform competence and professionalism, I realized I didn't need those answers anymore. I already know everything that matters. What do you know? That you stayed. That you showed up every single day, even when it was hard, even when people judged you, even when you probably wanted to disappear too. She folded her hands on the table. She listed resilience on her resume. But you're the one who taught me what that word actually means. I felt something tighten in my chest, the kind of emotion that doesn't have a clean name. Pride mixed with grief, mixed with relief that the person sitting across from me had become exactly who I'd hoped she would. When I recuse myself tomorrow, they'll ask why. Lily continued. I'll tell them the truth, that she's my biological mother, that she left when I was an infant, and that I haven't had contact with her since. I'll provide documentation if they need it, birth certificate, custody records, whatever proves a conflict. She looked at me directly. They'll probably still hire her. She's qualified. She interviewed well. My relationship with her doesn't change her professional abilities. How do you feel about that? Honestly? Fine. She can have the job. She can have whatever professional success she's built for herself. Lily's voice was calm, certain. But she doesn't get to have me. Not as a daughter. Not as a colleague. Not as someone who pretends the past didn't happen. When I submit my recusal, it goes into her employment file. She'll find out eventually that her daughter works there, that I interviewed her, and that I walked away because I had to maintain professional integrity. She closed her laptop. You taught me that. To do the right thing, even when it's uncomfortable. To let the record speak. To not engage with people who've proven they can't be trusted, no matter how polished they look now. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. I'm proud of you. I know, she said and smiled, small, sad, but genuine. You've been telling me that since I was 6 years old. We finished dinner and talked about other things. Her work projects, my plans to finally replace the kitchen faucet, whether she'd come over Sunday for our usual breakfast routine. Normal things. Good things. The kind of ordinary conversation that proved we'd built something Rachel's absence couldn't touch. When she left that night, I stood at the window and watched her car pull away, taillights disappearing down the street. Somewhere across the city, Rachel was probably reviewing her interview, confident she performed well, unaware that the woman across the table had been the baby she'd abandoned, now grown into someone who knew exactly what integrity looked like. The verification had already happened, not in a courtroom or a confrontation, but in a quiet office where Lily had chosen policy over emotion, professionalism over revenge, and truth over silence. Just like I'd taught her. The call came on a Monday morning, 3 weeks after Lily had recused herself from the hiring decision. They hired her, Lily said without preamble. Rachel starts next month. HR called me in this morning to discuss workplace protocols given a family relationship. I was in my kitchen, coffee halfway to my lips. I set the mug down carefully. How did that go? Professional. Clinical. They asked if I could work in the same building without issue. I said yes. They suggested we maintain separate project teams when possible. I agreed. She paused. They also told me Rachel requested a meeting with me after HR informed her of the connection. My hand tightened on the counter. What did you say? I said I'd think about it. Her voice was measured, the way it got when she was working through something complicated. I wanted to talk to you first. That evening, she came over again. We sat in the living room this time, on the couch I'd bought when she was 10, reupholstered once when she was in college. The apartment had changed over the years, new furniture, fresh paint, upgraded appliances, but the bones were the same. the place where we'd survived and built something together. I don't owe her anything, Lily said, staring at her hands. I know that. You've never said it explicitly, but I've always known. She left. She chose to leave, and you chose to stay. That's right. But I keep thinking about the custody thing when I was 6. How scared I was. How you handled it by just showing up and telling the truth, over and over, until the system saw what was real. She looked up at me. You didn't fight her with anger. You fought her with facts. I didn't want you to learn that hatred was an acceptable response to being hurt. I know, and I didn't learn that. She was quiet for a moment, so now I'm trying to figure out what the right response is here. She wants to talk, maybe to apologize, maybe to explain, maybe just to make herself feel better about the past. I don't know her motives, but I keep asking myself, what would you do? I thought about that question carefully. What would I do? Not what felt satisfying, but what aligned with the person I tried to be for the last 20 years. I'd probably meet with her once, I said finally. Not because she deserves it, but because you deserve to make that decision from a place of complete information, not assumption. You meet her, you listen, and then you decide what kind of relationship, if any, you want going forward. On your terms, not hers. Lily nodded slowly. And if she wants something from me, forgiveness, a relationship, absolution, then you tell her what you're willing to give, which might be nothing at all. You don't owe her comfort, Lily, but you also don't owe her your anger. That's what I learned. Anger would have eaten up the years I spent with you. I couldn't let her take that too. She leaned back against the couch, processing. Do you ever wish you'd said more? Fought harder? Made sure everyone knew what she did? Sometimes. But then I think about what that would have cost. My energy, my peace, your childhood. And I realize I made the right choice. The people who needed to know the truth knew it. You knew it. That was enough. The next week, Lily met Rachel in a conference room at her office during lunch. She told me about it that evening, not in person this time, but over the phone while I was making dinner. It was strange, she said. She cried, apologized, said she'd been young and overwhelmed and made a terrible mistake, said she thought about me every day. Lily's voice was flat, observational. I listened, didn't interrupt. When she finished, I told her I appreciated her honesty, but that I'd built a life without her and didn't have space in it for a relationship right now. Maybe not ever. I said I'd be professional at work, but that was all I could offer. How did she react? She asked if there was anything she could do to change my mind. I said no. Then I left. She exhaled slowly. I keep waiting to feel something big, relief or anger or closure. But most I just feel settled, like I confirmed something I already knew. What did you confirm? That you were enough, that you were always enough. Her voice softened. She asked if you'd poison me against her. I told her you'd never said a bad word about her in my entire life, that every choice I made about her was based on her actions, not your commentary. She didn't know what to say to that. After we hung up, I pulled out the old folder from my desk drawer, the one I'd kept for 20 years. Inside was the note Rachel had left, now yellowed and creased from handling. I can't do this. I'm sorry. Don't try to find me. 11 words that had once felt like the end of everything. I held it for a moment, then placed it back in the folder and returned the folder to the drawer. Not thrown away, not burned in some symbolic gesture. Just filed, acknowledged but not empowered. A piece of history that no longer dictated the future. Lily had made her choice. She'd listened, considered, and decided based on her own values. The values I'd tried to model every day for 20 years. She'd chosen integrity over bitterness, clarity over drama, and boundaries over obligation. That was enough. That was everything. 7 years later, I stood in Lily's backyard watching her teach her daughter how to plant tomatoes. The house was small but solid, a 2-bedroom in a neighborhood with good schools and sidewalks where kids rode bikes until dark. Lily had bought it 3 years ago, and I'd helped her paint the kitchen and install shelves in the garage. Now those shelves held tools she'd learned to use herself. Teaching videos bookmarked on her phone for when she needed to fix a leaking faucet or replace a light fixture. You have to be gentle with the roots, Lily was saying to Emma, who was 4 and took everything seriously. See? We make a little space, tuck them in, then cover them up like a blanket. Emma's small hands pushed dirt carefully around the seedling, her tongue between her teeth in concentration. She had Lily's dark hair and her father's easy smile, and she asked approximately 700 questions per day, each one treated by Lily with the same patient attention I tried to give her. Is that right, Mama? Perfect. Now we water it just a little, not too much. I sat on the porch steps with a glass of iced tea, watching them work. Lily's husband, James, was inside making lunch, sandwiches and pasta salad. Nothing fancy. He was a high school teacher, steady and kind, the sort of person who remembered everyone's birthday and showed up when he said he would. They'd met at a community education class 5 years ago, and when Lily had introduced him to me, I'd known within 10 minutes that he understood what mattered. Emma ran over to me, dirt on her knees and hands. Grandpa, did you see? I planted a whole tomato. I saw. You did a great job. Mama says you taught her how to plant things when she was little. I did, in an apartment. Actually, we used pots on the balcony. Emma's eyes widened. You can grow tomatoes in pots. You can grow a lot of things in pots, if you're patient. She considered this seriously, then ran back to Lily to report this new information. I watched her go, this small person who carried forward something we'd built without even knowing it, the patience, the attention, the quiet persistence of showing up and doing the work. Lily caught my eye and smiled. She looked tired in the good way, the exhaustion of a full life rather than an empty one. She worked reasonable hours now, had set boundaries with her job that protected her time with Emma. She'd moved to a different company 4 years ago, one where Rachel's name would never appear on an email or a meeting invite. Not out of fear, but out of choice. She'd built a career on her own terms. Rachel had sent a card when Emma was born. Lily had opened it, read the message, something about congratulations and regrets, and then filed it away without response. She'd told me about it in the same tone she used to report traffic on the highway. Factual, neither bitter nor forgiving, simply noting what was. The system didn't protect us, she'd said once years ago, after the custody case had finally closed in our favor. But we protected each other. That's what mattered. James called from inside that lunch was ready. Emma jumped up and ran toward the house, trailing dirt and joy. Lily stood, brushing soil from her knees, and walked over to me. You okay, Dad? I'm good. Just thinking. About what? I looked at her, at the house she'd built, the family she'd made, the life she'd chosen. About how well you turned out. She laughed, the sound easy and familiar. I had a good teacher. We went inside together, into the bright kitchen where Emma was already talking about planting carrots next and peppers and maybe pumpkins for Halloween. The table was set. The food was simple and enough. Outside, the tomato plants sat in their fresh soil, roots taking hold, growing toward whatever light they could find. I'd spent 20 years trying to be enough for Lily, trying to fill the space left by someone who'd chosen to leave. But sitting there, watching her with her daughter, I realized I hadn't just been enough. We'd been complete. The two of us, then 3, now more. Not despite the absence, but because we'd learned to build with what we had, time, attention, and the steady choice to keep showing up. The light through the kitchen window was ordinary and warm. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that needed explanation. Just a quiet proof that we'd survived, and more than that, we'd made something worth surviving for.